All right, guys. Is that everybody? Everybody get signed in? All right. So let's talk a little bit about O&M and emergency plans. Oh, excuse me, we're talking about emergency plans tomorrow. We'll talk a little bit about O&M today. This presentation also has some of the documents that I'm looking for whenever we come out to look at your facilities, just to kind of give you an idea. But there's also some other stuff kind of rolled into this. This, believe it or not, came out of the ground as is. You can see the bubble wrap on it. This is from a failure. And when they dug it up, you were talking about OQ earlier, when they dug it up out of the ground, the dirt was what was actually holding the saddle on the piece of pipe. You can tell there was no bonding or anything like that. So this person here, you could tell they did a pretty good job when they first put it on, but they didn't scar the pipe. They didn't do it properly. They didn't have proper qualifications. They didn't have proper joining practices. Just some of the stuff we run into. I can't install plastic above ground, and I definitely can't tie it to a piece of steel with some type of wire, right? But there it is. That was on the side of a bridge. And they had the pipe encasing along the bridge, but after it came out of the casing, it was strung up with this wire until it went down into the ground. If you have to put this many pieces or repair clamps, or you dig up a piece of pipe that has this many repair clamps, it needs to be replaced, okay? This is not the only one I've seen like this. We did one in middle Alabama, mid-state, and they had a bell hole there, and there was probably 10 of these on it, and 2 of them I could read the labels on, so I know they were dug up fairly recently, and it was right across the street from the courthouse, right? So we told the operator, look, either you abandon that line or you replace it, but we're not allowing you to dig it up again. So if you see something like this, please fix it. Don't just put another clamp on it and throw it back in the ground. You were talking about proximity to your homes and everything like that inside your parks, possible ignition sources, things like that. Please be aware, it is an issue, and I understand that everybody has to work in the environment that we're in, but please take care of those types of things. And this here is one of my favorites, and I know this is not really going to apply to you that much, but I have to show it. This is on the side of the house. Notice there's a barricade here, and this is a piece of gas pipe that went into the house. Okay? Can you tell what that is? That's the regulator, okay? Yeah, it's sticking out the side of the wall, okay? Yeah, there's the meter, okay? There's the meter. So we got the regulator. The regulator's over here, right? The meter's here. By the way, this is not in this state. This was in Nevada. I've seen worse, okay? Well, what's really great is what's inside the house. Okay, this is his little girl's room, right? And I want to tell you, he did the best sheetrock work of any person I've ever seen in my entire life. Look at that. There's no cracks or anything there all the way around that meter. I mean that's perfect. But, oh, and you notice there's a socket right there too, right? So we do see some weird stuff. And just want you to know that, if we're in a bad mood when we show up, it's probably because we saw something like this beforehand. So we talked a little bit about the retroactive subparts, and the retroactive subparts, in this case, we're really talking about operations and maintenance. So L&M, okay, L&M inside your operation maintenance manuals. 603 has basically tells some of the jurisdictional things that we can do. But it also tells you no person may operate a segment of pipeline unless it is operated in accordance with this subpart. Okay? Inside subpart L, we have operations, we have maintenance, we have patrolling, we have public awareness, we have SCADA for those of you that have SCADA systems. So you have to meet everything inside the subpart. The one that's really important down here is the one at the bottom. State or federal agency under U.S. Code 60101, which is what we talked about this morning, can require an operator to amend plans and or procedures to provide a reasonable level of safety. And what that means is these good folks here from California can walk into your facility and take a look at your procedure, practice, whatever you're going to do. And if they feel that it's unsafe, they can write you a violation, but it's not really a violation. It's kind of like a notice of amendment. We want you to amend this because we don't feel it's safe. Okay? They have the ability to do that under this code section. Okay? Now, you have the right to fight it. You can say, well, I think our procedure is perfectly fine. And you can come to the commission and you can balk it. Okay? But you can, they can write you if they find that your procedure is not safe or it's not adequate. So always keep that in mind. And remember, when we think about procedures, we're not talking about processes. A process is a point going from one point to the next, achieving something. A procedure is going step by step, a step-by-step process to do something. And when I do an inspection, what I like to do is I like to take a procedural manual, a procedure out of that manual. I like to hand it to one of the guys, the lowest guy on the totem pole, and say, hey, perform this. Okay? And if they can go out in the field and follow it step by step and do that action, then they can do it. The procedure's good. I don't have any problem with it at all at that point. I used to say VCR instructions, but I realize that I'm getting old. Nobody has VCRs anymore, so I don't know what to equate it to. One was IKEA furniture things or something. You know, if you can follow the directions and get a couch out of it, then I think you did a pretty good job. It may take you 3 days, but you'll get there. All right, so when a procedure is required, you got to remember, you cannot operate anything on your system unless you have a procedure to do it. So anytime anything's changed or extended, it's removed. In your case, not so much inspected, okay, but sometimes inspected. If it's located, if you have a locate inside your facility, shouldn't you verify that your maps and everything are correct? A lot of you don't even have maps right, and some of you don't have accurate maps. So if you dig something up, you want to make sure you know where it's located at, so you may have a procedure for doing that. If you replace something, did you have a question or? Okay. Anytime you operate anything, if you operate a valve, you should have a valve procedure, okay? The valve procedure sounds kind of strange, but there's a reason why we have a valve procedure, okay? If you have a house or a mobile home or whatever, and you shut gas off to that facility, to that house, then there's no longer gas going into it, right? And it stops. Well, I mean, it doesn't stop exactly, but they'll burn the gas out of line, right? At that point, if they have pilot lights inside that structure, if you turn that valve back on, what's going to happen? Well, they need to be relit, right? Because if not, they'll fill the building up with gas, right? So there's a procedure to deal with that, okay? So to give you an idea, I worked on the Gulf Coast, and whenever we had a hurricane come in, we shut off an entire island, okay? So we'd go and we'd shut the island off, and we'd go to each individual house. We shut off every single meter. We lock them. We tag the meter set. We go around to the door, and we put a hanger on each one of them, okay? And that was our procedure. When we left, everything was good. We knew the house was secure, and nothing was going to happen. Nobody's going to turn that gas back on unless we were there to do it. And then we had a turn-on procedure. And that turn-on procedure was once the people came back and found that they still had a house, and we would go out and we would inspect the house to ensure that the plumbing was still in good shape. We would go in, we would relight or verify that if we had to relight, and then we would take a CGI and we'd check inside the building and make sure that there were no leaks, and then we would move to the next one. That was our procedure for putting it back in operation, okay? So whenever you start or stop a project, you don't deal with changes of products. If you have a release, what do you do if you ever release a product? You know, the code does not tell you what a leak is. There's no definition of leak in the code. It says, basically, we consider it an accidental escape of gas. Okay? In DIMP, we have a definition for a critical leak, and a critical leak is anything that we can't solve by walking back to our truck and getting a wrench and tightening something. Okay? So if gas is blowing out of a meter set, and I walk back to my truck and I grab a pipe wrench and I and I start working on it and it stops leaking, then it's not a gas leak, okay, because it's not a hazardous leak. And then when you do your reporting, they call it hazardous leaks. They don't call it gas leaks. Yes, sir. Yeah, we run into the same thing. The problem is they have to do it. There's no choice. It's their safety over anything else, and you just have to convince them. There's nothing in it that states it specifically, but you could share it, and it could become part of your public awareness, right? You have to post your public awareness messages for them. It wouldn't be something, it wouldn't be bad to go ahead and tag that into that, but I don't know how to address it. You're going to find codgy people. We were just talking about shutting off the island. I would have people go out there and take bolt cutters and cut the locks off and turn businesses and stuff back on. Because a lot of them are shut down for 2, 3, 4 weeks at a time before they can come back into operation, and we couldn't get them relit quick enough, so they would do it automatically, even though it's against the policy. We had a similar incident too. Guy was on propane in a manufactured home, 3 foot off the ground, and there was 3 foot of snow on the ground, and I had a propane leak. And propane is what, heavier than air, right? So propane underneath the trailer. He calls the operator. Operator comes out, looks at the system, says, "Look, the leak's on your side. Okay, it's in your plumbing. I'm going to shut the meter set off, tag it like I'm supposed to by my procedure, and you need to get a contractor out here to fix your plumbing." Okay? So the guy called the contractor. Contractor comes out, fixes the plumbing, and the owner calls the operator back and says, "Okay, plumber's come out. I can show you the bill. He's fixed all the plumbing and everything like that. I just need you to come turn me back on." So the operator comes back out. Same story. They wouldn't let him inside the house, but he went ahead and turned the meter set on. Okay? About 3 days later, the homeowner called the operator up and telling him, says, "Look, I still smell propane. I still smell propane. I don't know what's going on." And the operator says, "Well, it's just residual smell. Or light a candle." The only thing left of the trailer were the rails, and it melted them, and it filled up the entire space underneath that trailer with propane, and it was gone. It literally just melted those big steel I-beams that are underneath the trailer. It was pretty impressive. So yeah, they have to do it. Now they could use their own contractor. You could go out there and stand in front of if they don't like you coming into their house, maybe they'd be willing to do somebody else. So look, if you're not willing for me to go in, you could pay somebody else to come and turn it on for me. I need to stand here and watch them do it to make sure everything's safe, right? Yeah. No, I know exactly what you mean. So we've been shot at. The reason why it's a felony to attack meter readers is because one of the guys in Birmingham got attacked by a bat. When he went to go read a meter, the person thought he was going to shut off the gas and attacked him with a bat. So we've been shot at and all kinds of fun stuff, so I appreciate it, trust me. One of my best friends ended up laying over the top of a fence with a bulldog on his pants. He couldn't get loose. He called us. We were like 3 blocks up the road, and Brad is like 6'3", and he had made it all the way to the back of the house. It was a quarter-acre lot. Read the meter. I was way back. The old lady in the house sicked her bulldog on him. And he was tall enough, he figured he'd clear the fence on the way out. And he did clear the fence with all but one leg. And that leg, the bulldog caught him and had latched onto his pants and was holding him right there. And luckily he had his phone on him, so he called us. And, of course, we cried. We laughed so hard when we got there. But I couldn't get the dog's mouth pried open, so what we ended up having to do was cut his pants. And then the dog fell in the yard. We got him back over, but it was hilarious. And to this day, I still give him heck about it. It's been 20 years now. So, but it happens, trust me. Y'all are not going to worry about being compressed. Now, if you go to add on to your system course, you're going to want some type of procedure for doing that type of thing. One of the problems we're having with procedures is specificity. Okay, specificity. So we want to see who, what, when, where, how, why, all those fun things. You need to be able to answer them. Now, here's the problem, though. These guys here, they want you to be very specific on your procedures. Coming from I was raised underneath a contractor. I went to an operator, then went to the state as an inspector. There's a happy balance here, okay? If you write it too specific, it won't take care of every single situation you're going to run into out there, okay? But you write it too loose, and it's not going to be adequate. So you're going to have to find that happy balance there whenever you're writing these procedures, okay? It's not something that's going to be there's no surefire way, and it depends on your inspector, too. Some inspectors are a little more touchy than others about those types of things. So, clarity, if you have corrosion, you may have corrosion references inside of that. You may even have ways of addressing different things, different concerns. For example, if you're taking cathodic reads and you're doing pipe to soils and you have dry soil, then you're allowed to put a little bit of water on the soil to make better contact with that. You could write that into your procedure, okay? So anybody following that would be able to, okay, I could pour a little bit of water here and get a little better connection, see if I get the reading up, okay? Any type of safety docks, if you have corporate docks or if you have docks for your particular park or a series of parks, anything that goes along with that could possibly be referenced in there. And your emergency plans could also be referenced, okay? We talked about starting up and shutting down meter sets and things like that. Obviously, there's some issues with that, and some things should probably be in your emergency plans. You can cross-reference those and put them into your procedures. They don't necessarily have to be a step. They could be like, okay, if you found a problem doing this, okay? If you picked up a half cell and it's milky, you don't take readings. You go and you do this. You go clean it out and put fresh water in it, and, you know. So those things could be in there. Design documents, if you have any type of design documents, if you have, for example, if you're using polyethylene, you want to use the manufacturer's documentation, you could cross-reference that. If you're using Fisher 99 regulators, then you could cross-reference the manufacturer's documentation on those, okay? It doesn't necessarily have to be something you do. Component manuals, all that fun stuff, maintenance manuals, things, how to take care of valves. If you have oil-filled valves, how to maintenance those guys. So if anybody comes back behind you, they can go, okay, well, these particular valves, I got to do them this way. So the plan should outline for compliance. They should either say what you do, or you should do what they say. Simple as that. There's some language and stuff involved with these too, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more. The big thing here is trying to stay in compliance, trying to meet all the requirements. And like I said, sometimes it depends on the inspectors that you have. So we're looking for the right level of specificity. We're looking at that happy balance. This one here actually is from a true O&M manual. This is a true procedure. And it'll say dresser-style reinforcement sleeves, weld-overs, pumpkins, and possum bellies. Okay? And the reason why it's written like that is because depending on where the operating crew that's reading that procedure is at, they call them different things. Okay? So if you're in Louisiana, south of I-10, they call pumpkins, what we call pumpkins, they call possum bellies. Okay? And what a possum belly is, or a pumpkin is, it's a weld-over, full containment sleeve. Just welds onto the piece of pipe. That's all it is. but there are different names of it, and depending on who's reading it, we've got to make sure that they understand what we're talking about. Now, looking at passive versus active voice, the town was destroyed by fire versus fire destroyed the town. Okay? Think about how these sentences go. Isn't it much easier to read fire destroyed the town versus the town was destroyed by fire? Doesn't it make more sense? Not only is it shorter, it's more to the point, it's more accurate. Funny is what clowns are. And you say, well, that's a really strange sentence, but you would be surprised that we see in some of these manuals. Clowns are funny. Sometimes we find double negatives. We have just really strange stuff. I looked at a welding procedure from an operator the other day. There was actually 3 different welding procedures. They had mashed together, and all of them fought with each other. You couldn't tell what the actual procedure was because one said they'd use this type of rod, and one said this type of rod. One would say this rate of welding versus another rate of welding. It didn't make any sense. Clarity. We want to be specific. So incident needs to be reported to the gas controller. Well, the dilemma here is who's going to do it? How are they going to do it? What's the method, the methodology? The incident needs to be reported to the gas controller. Who's going to do it? If you go out there and there's a fire in your park and there's gas flowing up out of the ground and you need to make a report on it, who is the one that actually makes the report? Because we've had a lot of cases where we've had a lot of people there responding to the report, taking care, making sure everything's safe, and getting the fire department, police department stuff in, but nobody actually reported it because they were like, wait, John was going to do that, or Ed's going to do that. No, you need to kind of be specific on who's going to do that type of stuff. I wouldn't put a name here, though. Notice it says the supervisor. It doesn't say Sam will do this, right? We don't want a name there because we, gain and lose people through the years, right? But the supervisor or the first employee on the scene will report the incident within 15 minutes of arriving on the site to the gas control center by telephone or company radio. Okay? So basically, upon confirmation that there's something happening and it involves your system, then at that point, somebody needs to make the call and you need to determine who it is. So looking at operation maintenance, the operation maintenance section's in 605. You have to have this manual prior to operation of the pipeline. Okay? So all of you should have one. It should be up to date. It needs to be checked every single year, not to exceed 15 months. Okay? So everybody in here should have one, and they should have looked at one within the last 15 months. Okay? Doesn't mean that you had changed it, but you should have at least looked at it. If it's perfectly fine, there have been no changes, then just give me a little signature and the date that you looked at it, and we're all good. Okay? And I'm going to tell you, most inspectors are perfectly happy with you just putting a page on the front of it with your signatures and when you looked at it. Okay? It doesn't have to be anything complex. It has to be prepared before it goes into operation. Must be available to operations and maintenance personnel. If you have it in your house or it's in the office where the people that work on your system can't get to it, then that is insufficient. Okay? However, they don't have to have it on them when they're actually performing operations. So if your office is open 24 hours a day and it's on the shelf inside your office and they know where it's at, then that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong, because most of them are going to know what each one of those procedures are. They're supposed to be trained on them. So if they need a little additional information or they haven't done something in a while, they can pull that guy off the shelf, they can flip to it, look at the procedure, close it back up, stick it back on the shelf, and go about their business. Okay? This just talks about transmission operators. It doesn't really apply here, but they have to have procedures for normal operations. Some of the things we look at whenever we look at these, excuse me, we look at the O&M revision history. I know it's simple, but I like just a little sheet at the beginning of it, say, Bryan Kichler, 1/26/99. 1/26/2001, just to let me know that I had looked at it those dates, okay? I can tell you we did one that was a cookie cutter O&M that was purchased from AGA. And by the way, these O&Ms are about $13,000 a piece for a full operator. So if you're going to purchase one, they're kind of expensive, pricey. They had purchased them, but they didn't consider what was actually in it, okay? And they didn't look at it. So we went through and actually sat in their office for 2 days and walked through their O&M and made notes on their O&M form to try to help them out. So, okay, guys, you don't have this, so you can just take this whole section out. This here needs to be specific. You didn't even put your own company name here. You need to tell us what, if it's going to be a supervisor or whoever's here. So I walked through that entire manual, left notes and everything for them. I come back 2 years later, and my notes are still in their O&M manual, and they handed it to me. And they even revised it. They put the revision signature at the front of it. It's insufficient. All right, give me a little bit of effort anyway. Management change documents, if you have any management change, most of y'all probably won't. Procedure, emergency manual. Sometimes the emergency manual is inside the O&M manual. Sometimes it's outside of it. That's fine. That's not a problem. With you, it might be easier just to put it inside the O&M manual, so we didn't have to worry about it. And, of course, the list of identified abnormal operations, which doesn't apply to you guys. Has to have procedures for the following: operating, maintaining, and repairing the pipeline. So anything involved in operating, maintaining, and repairing. This is pipe that's already in the ground, it's operating. That's the big thing with this and OQ. You can kind of compare the two. OQ is anything that's in operation. So if that pipe has gas in it, then you have to have OQ to work on it, okay? Same thing with O&M manual. Controlling corrosion. Whenever you're working out on your pipeline, any type of corrosion methodologies, if you're using ground beds or using stake anodes or ribbon anodes or however you're taking care of your system, then those procedures should be in this manual, okay? Now, one thing I'm going to warn you about, because I'm seeing it a lot. We're seeing a lot of steel and cast iron. You probably don't have any cast iron here, but we're seeing a lot of steel being replaced by plastic, okay? And that's a good thing. I'm a plastic guy, right? The dilemma is if you do that and you don't replace the steel service lines, each one of those become an isolated steel structure, okay? And they have to be checked once a year. They also have to be cathodically protected. So if you're going to replace that steel, go for it. But keep in mind that you might want to go ahead and replace your services while you're doing it, okay? Sir? No, they can leave the steel that's there. They can just abandon that line. But the steel lines that are attached, that they're steel service lines, yeah, those become isolated, right? At that point, they become isolated metallic structures, and then underneath code, I have to check them once a year. You're talking about tying your services back into the abandoned line, right? Right. I don't think you can push enough current. Yeah. Yeah, you're only talking a couple of volts. I'm not sure if you can be able to push it. Yeah. Your best option is stake anodes. They just have a collar, and you put them on the side of your riser and just drop it in the anode, and they last about 10 years. So until you get the chance to replace those. But I don't think you can push enough amperage to do that. Other things, you got to make your construction records, maps, operating history available to your personnel. So anybody who goes out and works on your system, whether it be a contractor or the people that work for you, thing to remember is whenever a contractor comes to work for you, they're considered a part of your crew. They're considered part of your company, okay? So at this point, you get them on your site to have them perform work for you, they are literally your employees. So by code, they're treated as your employees at that point. Gathering data, reporting an incident. If you have an incident, you have to do a failure investigation of that incident. So gathering of that, it may not be something that you want to do. You say, I'll hand it off to a lab, or I'll hand it off to an outside agency. So, but if you have a failure, you're supposed to be able to determine, or you're supposed to spend the time to at least determine what the problem was, what the failure cause was. Sometimes they're not very obvious. Most of you are working fairly low pressure systems. It's pretty obvious. You can go and you could pressure test it or something like that and determine if it was a leak or if it was corrosion or something like that. But you're supposed to have a procedure for doing that. Starting up, shutting down pipeline, purging, isolating, maintaining compressor stations, which none of you have. Some of the documentation, pressure charts, SCADA data for any of those that might have SCADA, any type of maintenance documentation, whether it be from the contractor or from yourselves, any of that documentation is something I'm looking for. Work orders, if I decide to send out work orders or send out crews on different things, what am I requesting for them to do? Am I requesting for them to replace a pipe or what? And just remember, you don't have to have all these. These are only just some ideas. Corrosion readings, if I were doing cathodic checks, if I'm doing a 850 criterion, then I would need to see if I were meeting that 850 criterion, right? Any type of atmospheric corrosion inspections, where you walk out there and you take a look at the risers, make sure that everything is good there. Another good place is right at the pipe-to-soil interface, right, which is actually the worst place for corrosion. So any of those inspections need to be on there. If you have vaults, most of y'all probably don't, but if you do have vaults, do vaults inspections. Any type of as-built, service drawings, leak surveys, incident reports, and of course, we're not worried about safety-related conditions. This goes into additional stuff for periodic review of existing procedures, going back and looking at those. Anybody that works on your system should know what your procedures are, and any work performed on your system should use your procedures. If you get a contractor in, you need to tell them and say, look, you got to do it this way, okay? And they're supposed to follow that, okay? And if they say, well, I can't do it that way, why can't you do it that way? And we'll see if we can modify it. Well, if it's like electric, and I don't know if this is your guys doing, or it might be PG&E's doing, we never common trench electric and gas, ever. I don't know whose bright idea that was. Polyethylene, okay, it's actually a liquid, okay, and it starts to melt at about 180 degrees. An electrical service line into a building or structure or just running in the ground typically hits about 210 degrees, okay? So if it becomes too close to a polyethylene line, it has a tendency to degrade it, if not melt it. We had a mall explosion that nearly killed a firefighter just because of that. To be honest with you, since you're in this particular incident situation, follow the procedures they already have. Okay, because it's safer. Yeah. For just safety purposes, they have already determined how to do that, so it's best to follow their procedures. Might not be a bad idea to adopt their procedures for dealing with it. And you can do that. You can pick up their procedures, or any of you. Don't think about the fact that you have to write your own independent procedure. You don't have to. You can come over here and you can pick up Dave's, and Dave has an excellent cathodic protection procedure, I can pick up his procedure and run with it, right? As long as it's applicable to my system, there's nothing wrong with that. That's right, as long as you follow it. Precautions and equipment needed to ensure safety in a gaseous atmosphere. Mostly for what you're doing, it's going to be like grounding tools and things like that. You probably won't be on SCBAs like this guy here. You're not going to worry about management of change documents because those don't really apply to y'all. Training programs, roster, schedules, any type of training you do. Obviously, public awareness. If you do any type of training, for example, if you have several parks and you bring guys in and they all train at one thing, if you include additional people, for example, if you're doing like emergency response and you have the local fire department, police department in, you can use that under public awareness also. So don't think that you're just meeting one qualification and going to meet another qualification. You can actually kind of sandwich these together and take credit for 2 or 3 things at once. Okay? So those rosters and schedules, those are important. Those are important. Maintenance documentation, CGI flame packs, if you have either of those, if you have CGIs and you have them calibrated, which you should, right? I think most CGIs it's 2 years. You should get a sheet back. The sheet will say how far it was out of calibration and the fact that it's been fixed, and you'll have a sticker on your CGI. Keep that documentation, okay? That proves to me as an inspector that every reading that you did was correct when it was done, okay? Because if the CGI was out of calibration, I have no idea if those readings, those prior readings, are accurate or not. Fire extinguishers, making sure those are checked. Fire extinguishers usually completely what would be the proper word for it? It's not extinguished, properly released, unpressurized every 3 years. They should be weighed every year, okay? And also the type of powder that you're using is important as well. So if you're using monoammonium phosphate or sodium bicarbonate or potassium bicarbonate, knowing which ones are the best ones for your particular system. Air bottles, air filtration, if you're going to use those, y'all probably don't, and any other protective equipment like Carbonex or Nomex, things like that. Okay? I don't think you're going to do any inspection of bottle-type holders. This talks a little bit about pressure-limiting devices. This is a big one, too, promptly responding to an odorant call. So actually showing up at a house and checking it over, making sure that it's safe. And it's a big one for me because I know several incidents where we've had people, and we've actually had them go into structures just to find out there was still gas left in the building. If you just walk in the living room and you check readings, but you don't look through the rest of the house, we had one where there was 60% gas in a closet after the technician had already walked, checked the door, checked inside the house, inside the living room, and walked back out. And about 2 hours later, the homeowner called again. Another technician went out and found 60% gas in one of the closets. And you think about that 60% gas, it only takes between 5 and 15% gas to ignite, right? So quite a bit of gas inside that building. So how I'm going to respond to that, am I going to send a person out right away? Am I going to wait for the next available person, or am I going to do it within an hour? However I'm going to do it, I need to have some type of procedure for doing that. Control rooms, y'all probably don't deal with control rooms. I don't think anybody here does, so I'm going to go ahead and flip past that one. Some things we're looking for, leak survey reports. You had people out looking at your system, doing a leak survey on your system, or you've done leak surveys yourselves. Those reports, field survey reports, any type of, if I, for example, have somebody come in and do a locate for me, sometimes they'll draw up where the pipe is and everything like that, so if I don't know what it is. Any type of emergency repair documentation. Incident, accident logs, probably not going to be anything in your case, and of course there's additional control room stuff. And guys, if you think this is a lot of documentation, wait until you get in control room. Control room is probably 3 times what just this section would require. It's huge. Going on to C is transmission lines, so you don't have to worry about all of this additional stuff. You can go back and look through it if you want to, but none of that's going to apply to you. Here's safety-related conditions, some additional requirements. All that's underneath the transmission, so you don't have to worry about that. Go ahead and look at record retention. Now, here's the catch at record retention. You're better off just keeping it for life. Okay, any record you create, have, given to you, whatever, just keep it for the life of the pipeline. Okay? We do have retention intervals. Most of them are 5 years. Basically, they said this morning, 7 years is our typical inspection interval. That's what it means. 5 years was the typical PHMSA inspection interval, so it was till the next inspection. The problem is all this documentation has now been rolled in DIMP, which he was talking about earlier. Okay? Once it gets rolled into DIMP, then it's life of the pipeline at that point. Okay? So any documentation you keep, you might as well just keep it for the life of the pipeline and not worry about it anymore. So life of the facility, construction, materials, repairs, MAOP, which is what we're talking about earlier, maximum allowable operating pressure. All those have to be kept for the life of the pipeline. Other records, tests, pressure tests, on plastic pressure tests only required for 5 years, but you still have to establish your MAOP. So even though that you only have to keep that pressure test for 5 years, you still have to prove the MAOP, so you still have to keep it for the life of the pipeline, so you might as well just keep it anyway. Inspections, patrols, surveys, procedural reviews. Procedural reviews could be just your signature. We've looked through these. They're all perfectly fine. I'm happy. And there's a big smiley face and my name next to it. Here's the date. Okay? But those have to be retained for at least 5 years. So that was a heavy one for after lunch. What do you think? See, now that's the reason why I gave you the 10-minute break. So what do you think? Any questions? A lot of stuff, right? Yes, sir. It's a non-combustible material. You know, the code doesn't say that you can't. But here's the deal. You got to be able to check underneath it for atmospheric and, you know, and stuff like that. But if you could do that, then there's nothing in the code that says you can't. It's not as pretty, but yeah. That's, you know, a lot of our inspectors, they get caught up on looks and appearance and things like that, and they have a tendency to make their own 192 Dave, right? But perfectly honest, that code doesn't say anything about, you know, what material you use. You can use whatever you want, as long as it's non-combustible. Yeah.
But I have something to say. When when you put a block, what happens during rain, the water gains in between the two. So that may help corrode that are the issues corrosion. That, you know, if you did contact is the problem, that if water gets in, that's why you recommend that you don't use it. That's what you...
And see, I would come back and say, well, they don't make steel meters anymore, so they're aluminum. What difference it make? We can get into this all day long, but see, you see how this goes, right? You know, code says one thing, and we have to figure out, make sure it applies to everything. Well,